Welcome everybody out to video 2 for the free Takt University course. In this course, or this video specifically, I'm going to cover how projects fail and then how to predict success with operational excellence. And we're going to have some fun. I hope you're ready to go because there is some good information that we are about to share in this video right now. Before we begin, I do want to say that the source information is from How Big Things Get Done. And you're probably wondering, hey, J Money, like this is a free Takt University course. Why are we covering How Big Things Get Done? Well, hey, after the introduction that we did last time, I've got to now make the case for why we have to plan projects properly and where Takt comes into play. And that's what we're going to do right now. So in the book, How Big Things Get Done, I will say it this way. I really picked up on 3 key things. That if you want to do a project properly, you will plan remarkable projects, use processes that support remarkable projects, and make sure that the people and roles on the project are set up and training is available for that remarkable project. Number 1, planning. And in our industry, we don't plan our projects properly anymore. We have a really hard time with this and we've got to get back to it. So if we're ever going to get better, we have got to stop doing the bare minimum and stop thinking we can figure out things as we go. Number 2, the processes. In our industry, and I'm not bad-mouthing people, I'm bad-mouthing systems, we don't use the proper systems nowadays, whether it's from design or contracting or scheduling, they're all broken. That's not a campaign slogan. That is absolutely real. And number 3, we no longer train our professionals properly. Our people are running mega projects with anemic training programs. We've got folks out there who are great people. They're absolutely fantastic, but they don't have the support they need when it comes to actually receiving that training, and it's not right. Let's talk about planning projects. First of all, I want to anchor you to 2 images, the one that says current practices and then best practices. Here's the beginning of design, NTP, completion, end of warranty. Typically, we are asked to hop in and start planning a project like just a little bit before the project begins. It's absolutely ridiculous. Now you're probably thinking, J Money, that's the norm. Hey, I get that that's the norm, but it's not right. You don't have the time to plan when this happens. That's why I hate design, bid, build contracting systems. If you use IPD, IPD Light, design, build, CM at risk, you have the opportunity for the contractor to be in there much sooner. Now let's look at the best practices down here below. You'll notice that if the project is a certain duration and you take half of that, that is how long you should be planning the project out ahead. It's a 1/3, 2/3 ratio, and we've got to get that right. Now again, you're probably like, J Money, I love you, man. You are the best. We love you, but it's not possible. I'm telling you, even if it's not possible, it's crucial. And even if we can't get there tomorrow, we've got to head in this direction. It's absolutely imperative that we do. Now let me give you some stories. Let's talk about the train to nowhere. This is the California bullet train. This is everybody's favorite to criticize. Not everybody's, but it's definitely pretty popular in the book. The original for this train to nowhere was to go from San Diego all the way up to Sacramento and San Francisco. And the original was to finish in 2020. Now it's 2030. The original cost was $33 billion, and now it's going to be over $100 billion. The project scope originally was going to be 500 miles. Now it's 172 miles. It's going to go from San Diego to Bakersfield. And my joke is always this, and God bless everybody out there in Bakersfield, but unless you want to go get meth, I don't know of anybody in San Diego or Los Angeles or Riverside or Anaheim that want to go that far north for any reason. It's a complete waste of time. After 14 years of work, the project is 10 years behind schedule, and one of the main reasons is improper planning, wish thinking, and a failure to engage in a proper way according to the book, How Big Things Get Done. It's a tragedy. Now you're probably thinking, J Money, like this is pretty normal. Well, let me bring up the Empire State Building. You're probably maybe even tired of hearing this example, a great example, but it still stands as just a fantastic example of how to do things right in the industry. So let's go ahead and cover this now. The Empire State Building, the original plan versus the results, is a really telling story. So first of all, the project duration, it came in 2 weeks early. The project cost originally was $50 million and it finished at $41 41 million. Just to give you an idea, 41 million in today's dollars is around $147 million. It's absolutely remarkable. And the scope even increased. Oh, by the way, I hope you've noticed that they're using a time by location format over here. I just love it. Time by location scheduling really worked in this. So here's the deal. The steel frame was erected in a highly choreographed work sequence that minimized even a moment's downtime. Railway tracks were used to move materials, storage was optimized, and before every phase, the architects and the builders knew even the countdown to the bolts. They knew exactly what they were doing. They had experience and they had experimentation. It was quite remarkable, and I never get tired of telling it. So we've got to think slow in pre-construction during planning and act fast in the construction. And right now in construction, we think fast and act slow, and that's bad. So in our industry, when it comes to planning, which means plan the project, anchor to past experience through a reference class, assess and prevent risks, do Pixar planning, build the project on paper first and include the builders. We don't do a very good job of that. We got decent builders out there. They try to do a good job of executing the plan, monitoring costs, monitoring the schedule, collaborating with trades, solving problems, and adjusting to unforeseen conditions. I put a check mark here for effort, but really the point I'm making is you can't build it if you didn't plan it properly, okay? What this leads to is we don't finish well. Finishing means we met the quality expectations, we finished the work, we commissioned the systems, delivered the project, and demobilized. That's never going to happen on time if we didn't plan the project properly. Now, this is probably one of my favorite graphics in all of Elevate Construction done. Like, this is my jam right here. I absolutely love this. So let's talk about this. Your project has a certain amount of problems. Now, let's just say your project had 8. Yeah, obviously a project's going to have a lot more. But let's say you have 8 problems. Here's the deal. Everybody has problems. You have problems, your family has problems, your church has problems, your country has problems, your state, your local county, your city has problems. Everybody has problems. Everybody. If you cross your fingers and do what some people call wish thinking in pre-construction, then you're going to find these problems during the project. Now, guess what the problem there is? That's going to cost in delays, and it's going to cost a whole lot more money. And then you've brought up what's called the window of doom. That's where the project extends. It keeps running on, and risks and costs fly out the open window. Risks fly in, costs fly out, right? They call them black swans. That is a sub-optimized, non-effective way of doing things. If you have problems, you want to find these problems in pre-construction, and you want to deal with them and mitigate them and remove them and cover them and make sure that everything's covered, right? You don't wish thinking, right? You either get rid of it or cover it. You're not going to wishfully think it. Now, you're still going to have some problems out in the field, but when you take care of your problems in pre-con and you erase the whiteboard, you're able to finish on time, which is quite remarkable, and it's the goal of everything we're trying to do. Here's the data. In case you're like, Jason, I don't know that I necessarily believe you. The data is this. In the study in the book, How Big Things Get Done, of over 16,000 representative projects, only 47.9% finished on budget, and only 8, and I hope you're sitting down for this, 8.5% finished on budget on time, and then only 0.5% finished on budget on time as planned. These are horrific numbers, and when you look at it, of the 52.1% of projects that finished over budget, the average was 65%. Of the 91.5% of projects that finished late, the average is 58 days. That's horrible. And there are black swans that have been, meaning like really bad projects that have been 800 to 1990% over budget and time. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it has to stop. And it comes from not planning, not using the right systems, and not training the people, and specifically not having experience on the team, master builders, and not doing what's called experimentation. So that leads us to Hofstadter's law. Hofstadter's law says it always takes longer than you expect, even when you take into account Hofstadter's law. The point here is not to say that we just give up and assume that everything takes longer. The concept is that if we think this is how long it will take, and what I mean is in planning, and then you read the book, How Big Things Get Done, and watch this video, and this is how long you think it will take. This is how long it actually takes, meaning that we are undercutting how long we think projects take because we're not using historical data, we're using human opinion. And I just want everybody to know, human beings are absolutely horrible at estimating how long things take. We have to start using data. So what is the point of all this? Now, this is a quote from the book. I'm going to say it like this. Projects don't typically go wrong. They start out wrong. and they start out wrong because of a lack of planning. I don't want to be too harsh on anybody who's found themselves in this situation, because there are some reasons for it, right? These aren't all of them, by the way, but they're called the pushing fallacies. The 4 that I hate the most that are directly from the book are the need for speed, pushing makes haste. Oh my gosh, I hate that one. The commitment fallacy, hey, let's get the contractor committed, right? And then strategic misrepresentation, hey, this shouldn't be a big deal. Changes shouldn't be a big deal. Your trade partners can take care of it. It's not a big thing. So the need for speed, this is where rushing, pushing, and being in a hurry really hurts the team, and it won't help projects win. It will cut planning and preparation, which leads to a spiraling mess of rework, low quality work, prioritizing profits over people, and decreased safety on site. Generating speed in any way other than through creating flow is unsafe. If you start to rush the team and say, hey, we need to go fast, you're going to have rework, low quality, profits over people, and unsafe environments. What about pushing? People are like, well, of course, Jason, pushing makes haste. Well, in just like we have over here on the right, this little picture, or your own blood pressure, or in any analogy you want to come up with, pushing doesn't help, actually. The belief that pushing people, pushing milestones too soon, and rushing work will make haste and help projects to progress and finish is wrong. The truth is that pushing creates pressure. We can go through these one by one here if you'd like. This is pretty well documented. There are actually books on this. Pushing leads to quick and erratic decision making, unclear communication, team members losing focus, a decrease in creativity and problem solving ability, an increase in finger pointing, declines in productivity as energy is wasted, diminished trust, a loss in morale, possible decrease in the quality of work, and the team becoming more susceptible to making mistakes or overlooking critical details. Pushing does not make haste, it makes chaos, and we've got to get away from it. Let's talk about the commitment fallacy. When owners, designers, or contractors falsely believe that getting a project started and a contractor under contract will provide the motivation to make haste and complete it with urgency and efficiency, that's wrong. If the contractor begins without proper planning, it's likely they don't know what they're doing, and they will be too busy catching up and covering their interests to properly manage the project. This is like getting somebody, and I'm not trying to be irreverent with this is like trying to get somebody pregnant in hopes they'll marry you. It's not a good decision. It's not going to work out. What about strategic misrepresentation? This is one that I really hate. When owners, designers, and contractors misrepresent, and I'm going to say either intentionally or accidentally, existing conditions, complexity, or it could be about the scope or the risk or how hard it will be to change things to get the other party to work through and push what otherwise would be a change in cost or time. It's a fallacy to believe that the end justifies the means. This is a disgusting and inexcusable behavior when we misrepresent the reality and don't take the proper actions on the project site. Let me back this up with a little bit of data here. And I've studied this personally. Now, this isn't like an exhaustive 40-year study, but over the course of 7 years in Phoenix, I studied specifically projects that were like where we did takt planning on one and CPM on the other. Well, actually, we didn't. We observed the contractor doing the CPM and the pushing on the other. And we could compare a takt plan project to that competitor's CPM plan, or where we bid on the project and won it and compared our takt plan versus their CPM plan. In those two scenarios, we found this similar data. So let me just go ahead and point some of this out to you. And this was pretty well observed by me over those years, and I had a stake in the game because I was doing proposals in this part of my career. Here's what I observed. When a contractor pushes and does a critical path method plan, they're typically about 20% under what they needed to be in order for the project to work, right? It's too short, it pushes the labor, and everybody really knows it typically, okay? What happens is they thought they would finish here, but actually they used all of the rest of the time of what the project would actually take, which we had a control group for, by the way, and we found out that the project would typically be between 5 and 15% over, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it came at a horrible cost of crash landing, hurting people, finances wasted. It was absolutely crazy. Like, it is just, these were just dumpster fires. Absolutely horrible information. And so whether it was two different types of, or do two different jobs, but similar type building, similar contract amount, where we're using takt and the other competitors pushing with CPM, or where we won it with takt and we're observing what the other contractors actually bid, comparing these scenarios scenarios, this is what we found. And it was actually interesting. Luckily, we had similar projects where we were able to compare this in many instances, and it was quite enlightening to see the actual results. Now, when you look at the TACT plan, and yes, this is a bit biased. By the way, I have to say to everybody, I didn't come into this consulting deal trying to sell TACT. I just went in to try and teach supers, and we found out quickly that if you pair supers with CPM, they would fail. If you paired supers and project teams with TACT, they could win. And I'll tell you why. But when you are going and doing a proposal, and you're going to actually get some buffers in the system, and you know exactly, I would say within 1 to 5%, but you know exactly when the project needs to finish or the phase needs to finish, and so you know how long the project takes, right? What we found out is that on average, the project would still finish 1 to 5% early, even with the delays that they experience. Now, people are always like, Jay Money, I love you, homie, but how are we going to win projects that way? And let me tell you a dirty little secret. When I was a project director in business development was like, hey, Jason, we've got to put a competitive schedule number into this. We can't just show them exactly what it's going to take. I have 2 comments with that. Number 1, I said, hey, fine, we can tell that story in the proposal and the interview and tell them why it's actually going to take that and why our solution is better. Or I said, worst case, sell the project and we need to get it back. And some comments were like, we can't get the right amount of time. And in all 5 of the projects where I was acting in some form of a capacity, either as the full project director on the project or helping in that short stint, the owners were always amenable to getting us back to the right amount of time. So I don't buy that excuse. So the bottom line is, if you have the right amount of time, we found out that people finished early. So let me go back before and analyze why. So why did the project finish late? It's because when project teams know that they don't have enough time and they're rushing and pushing and panicking, they start to do things that are anti-production and they finish late. When you have a TAC plan, as long as you have a strenuous performance goal, a behaving team, and a multiplier leader, and we'll talk about that in different videos in different contexts, that's when a project would go wrong, not start wrong. But if you have those things, then the team knows that they have good time, then they're able to flow and follow good production principles and still finish on time. So this is what we observed. Pushing does not help, and pushing is pretty natural. So I want to introduce you to this concept of the 10th person, 10th man, 10th woman, and basically cue it up like this. If you want to do something fun, go type in World War Z on Amazon, and you can actually look up the specific scene. It's where Brad Pitt is investigating why Israel built a wall. His character is an investigator for infectious diseases, and he finds out that Jerusalem built a wall before the zombie virus spread. And so he flies there, he gets into the city, and he asks one of the high-ranking officials in the Mossad, how did you know to build a wall? And the high-ranking official says, well, we received a radio communique from India that mentioned the word Rakshasa, or undead, or zombie. And Brad Pitt's character is like, come on, man, you built a wall because you received a radio communique that said zombie? And he was like, well, if you put it that way, I would be skeptical as well. But here's the reality. In the movie, and I'm just quoting the movie, he said, before World War II, the Jews refused to believe they could be sent to concentration camps. There were other times where the Jews saw signs of a possible bombing and ignored them and sustained a terrible tragedy. There was another time where and he's mentioning the Mossad, saw Arab troop movements and they unanimously decided that they didn't pose a threat, and then the Arabs almost drove the Jews or Israel into the sea. And he said, then we decided to make a change. And Brad Pitt said, a change. And he said, the 10th man. If any group of people look at the same information and come to the same conclusion, it is up to the 10th man to dig deeper and to look at it with a critical eye and to assume that the information is either contrary to groupthink or that the information they're seeing is accurate and possibly does pose a threat. And so Brad Pitt was like, and you were the 10th man. And then the character in the movie at the end of the clip, which we can actually give to you in the description below, said precisely. And so this concept of the 10th man is critical. We are going to continue undercutting durations for projects unless in pre-construction we start having a 10th man or woman, a 10th person, to raise the hand and say, hey, I don't think this is an accurate assumption. Okay, we have to operate under the assumption that something may be wrong and stop wish thinking. Your most positive people, your optimists in pre-con, are the most dangerous people on your team. And so we've got to do it. One of the things that we can do here is think from right to left instead of left to right. In the book, we pulled this out. So, come down to the goal and make sure you've established dates, steps, and the team. So don't build until the dates are accurate and the previous steps are 100% achieved and the team is fully organized and everything is complete and ready to go. So thinking right to left is not natural, so it forces you to think more creatively. Each step directly ties to the goal. First planners and last planners must be involved in this type of planning. When you adapt this thinking to construction, you end up with this. So if you are thinking from right to left, you've got to look at, hey, when do I want the project finished? That will dictate through a sequence of planning when you need to start the actual project. And one point that I want to make here is if you're doing production planning, you will work it backwards right through what we call a critical chain or the path of critical flow, all the way through these sequences, not in a rushing and pushing and panicking manner, but through proper sequences, a proper line of balance, proper buffers, and doing it in an intelligent way. So you're working it backwards and you're not rushing and pushing and panicking anybody because you're doing it, like I said, from right to left. Then step number 3 is when would design and pre-construction have to be completed and when would we actually have to start the design effort? Work from right to left in order for us to make sure that we have enough time in addition to looking at it critically. Here's the deal. When we do this kind of planning with the 10th person, with enough time, right, from historical data, what's the worst case that could happen? The whiteboard is accidentally erased. The paper is thrown away. The styrofoam is trashed. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. We've got to start doing more of this critical thinking and planning instead of trying to figure it out in the field, because the worst case in the field, it's actually pretty catastrophic, right? If you start messing around in the field, you could have structural collapses, overruns, ruined careers, injuries, or death. This is from the book. These are from studies. So we have to limit this exposure through proper planning. I'm telling you, proper planning is so underestimated. And even people who advocate for the last planner system and other lean systems will say don't plan, and it's wrong, right? So is this a departure from lean? Well, lean thinking says plan and iterate fast. In construction, we ensure that we plan and iterate fast in the planning stage, not during construction. There was never a suggestion ever that says, here, initial draft, we refine it, then we have our concept, then we actually build the thing in the field. We need to do this on paper. So lean thinking happens on paper. It happens in models. It happens with styrofoam. Iterating uncovers problems, and we do it in the planning phase. We don't do it out in the field. That's just throwing a lot of money away. So let's talk about Pixar planning. When they do Pixar planning, several months go into developing a story idea to about 12 pages. Rough drafts are written, feedback happens with an audience, another draft, another feedback session, several rounds, and improvement is required each time. Roughly, that's a 4-month process. And then the movie is made in a rough form. Pixar employees watch the movie and the director meets with a brain trust to receive criticism. This is famous, and I'm not proud of it, but sometimes creative folks come out of there crying. Substantial rewrites are completed and it's refilmed. This generally is done 8 different times. The real animation begins, professional voice actors record, and the score and sound effects are added. This is the version audiences see, generally and I hope you're sitting down, the 9th iteration. That means by the time you see a Pixar movie, it's the 9th movie. What would happen if in construction, the plan that we see is the 9th plan? And if that's too unrealistic, what if it was the 3rd? What if you at least had 1? And sometimes we don't even have 1. And that is detrimental. We don't start projects out right when we do that. So the Pixar planning experiment, basically iterations free people to experiment early on in planning. This process ensures every part of the plan is scrutinized before you actually go out to make the movie. Cognitive biases are challenged because each step has to be explained in detail and delusions evaporate. And by the time you actually get to like modeling where it's expensive, all of those problems have been removed. And the concept is that planning is cheap compared to the cost of production. And so we've got to start using this model in construction as well. There's a fun little movie. It's not a good movie though. Home on the Range by Disney. They didn't do this. They didn't iterate, and they fell in love with an idea, and it ended up being a corny movie, and it was a box office flop. Now, my kids liked it because kids will like anything, but it didn't do well. The purpose is to do well, and Pixar movies typically do pretty well. So we've got to follow that pattern. And I want to give you some examples here from the book. We've added the pictures. Let's compare the Sydney Opera House to the Guggenheim Bilbao. On the left, the Sydney Opera House, there was optimistic planning based on assumptions. The final design wasn't finished until many months of construction went by, and the original design proved impossible. Completed work had to be demolished and restarted. For the Guggenheim Bilbao, Frank Gehry completed not just drawings during the design, but built with blocks and models. He made multiple models each day at various scales and sizes. After 2 weeks of models, he had his final design for the exterior. He spent 2 years creating thousands of iterations in 3D modeling software. I like these two comparisons because sometimes when I compare like the bullet train to the Empire State Building, people are like, well, that's cheap, Jason. Obviously those aren't going to compare. But let's look at these two very complex projects. Let's look at this. The Sydney Opera House was fraught by political scandal. The architect left Australia in disgrace and never saw the finished building. The build was a 5-year plan that stretched to 14 years, and it was 1,400% over the estimated cost. Yes, it's beautiful, but from a construction standpoint, it was an absolute disaster. The Guggenheim Bilbao, look at this, it's just as complex. I mean, that is incredible. The project was delivered on time at a cost that was 3% less than expected, and it helped solidify Frank Gehry's status as a master of architecture. The Sydney Opera House over here to the left, there was no experience in that type of design and no experimentation with models or iterations. The Guggenheim Bilbao, this is an example of experience, which is key, meeting experimentation. You plan everything you possibly can and then experiment when you find that you need to. And they were, the one on the right, the Guggenheim Bilbao, was a massive success. And then somebody might be able to say, well, that was a one-off. Well, let's take some lessons from Frank Gehry. He said, we use all the technology available to us to quantify in the most precise way the elements of the build so there's not a lot of guessing. In our practice, we don't allow the client to start construction until we are sure that we are doing a building that is within their budget and meets their requirements. And another example would be the 76-story tower. No change orders. No change orders. So, and it was interesting the other day in a boot camp, somebody said they had actually worked on a project that Frank Gehry and his group had designed, and he said they did progressive things like submittal parties where they would hop in a room for 2 weeks and go over submittals together in an integrated fashion. It works, and this is the way to do it. And even if you don't see a clear path to get there, this is where we have to go. When you don't do this and you have a lack of experience and a lack of experimentation, you have really difficult situations like this. The Montreal Stadium, named the Big O or the Big OWE, 1,990% higher than the original budget. The citizens of Montreal and the province of Quebec spent the next 30 years paying for it. In 2017, the Quebec government approved the $250 million budget for a new roof, the third one, set to be installed by 2023, leaving Montreal with time to spare before the city plays host to some of the 2026 World Cup matches. Construction is now pushed to begin in 2024 and now has 2 years to be completed. An absolute disaster. I will say this is not a reflection of the people in the region, and they really don't deserve this. And this is what happens when you don't do what we're talking about here. Let's talk about some of the things that lead to this. And this is especially prominent in the United States, where we promote our master builders to corporate positions. And it's like shooting ourselves in the foot. Here's what I would do. If I had a master builder that's jamming out, building mega projects, doing a great job, delivering on time, I wouldn't neutralize them, put them in a truck, and basically render them ineffective and put them in meetings. I would pay the crap out of them and keep them building jobs, teaching upcoming builders, and at the worst case scenario, overseeing multiple projects, boots on the ground. The other thing I would do is I would give them enough time to pre-plan, like we talked about before. Remember, however long the project takes, divide that in half. That's how long we need in pre-con. Those master builders need to be there if they're going to be effective. Every project should begin with at least, and yes, you guessed it, a TAC plan and zone maps, procurement log, logistics plan, trailer and signage design, an organization chart, and a risk and opportunity register at a minimum before we ever start. Most of the time these things are developed during construction, which is a shame. So what we need is, and this is what's talked about in the book, a maximum virtual product. macro level tack plan, norm level tack plan, zone maps, logistics maps. We need roadblock trackers, procurement logs, all at the ready. A risk and opportunity register that will help us to identify risks and opportunities. A complete trailer design, an organized site, everything ready to go to support the team, 100%. And here's what I would say about systems. Instead of design, bid, build, let's use design, build plus CM at risk plus IPD, either any of those three. Instead of classical contracting, let's use lean partnering systems. Instead of traditional CPM, let's use the integrated production control system, Takt, and Last Planner. We've got to start merging our great builders, our master builders, with the right systems. Now I want to talk to you about a couple of quick things that came from the book at the conclusion of this training. The reason I love production planning and Takt is because we're able to find our Lego. You can read more about this on the left if you pause the video, but build one thing, find your pieces, see the mistakes with that piece, innovate, and repeat. When you do Takt planning or production planning, you find the repetitive areas in your building. And with Takt, I must say, you find the repetitive processes through all areas on any type of project, and you're able to get better and better and better and better. And one of the things that the book, How Big Things Get Done, found is that projects where they find their Lego, they do well. Another thing that came from the book was we need to take care of people. On the left here, and I don't mean this to be too negative, but on the left I list field and project engineering, scheduling, contracting, lean methodologies, team building, builder methods, problem prevention. This is what builders should know. We need real builders. On the right, I mentioned that our industry currently trains builders like security guards. If you think about it, hey, this is our company policy. This is the parking lot you control. These are the rules of Walmart, right? If you get into a conflict, here's your weapons. Here's some defensive training. Call 911. If you get into trouble, walk around and point. Well, that's exactly how the industry is trying to train builders nowadays. Well, here's our company policy. You control the site. Here are the rules. If you get into conflict, here's your contract. Here's how you can be defensive with some people. Call your project director or your PM if you have trouble, and walk around the job site and point. Our industry trains supers like Walmart trains security guards, and we don't want that. We want builders. Those who have been field engineers, the people who know scheduling and production planning, who know contracting, lean, team building. They have experience. They know how to prevent problems. So we've got to start training our people better, and we've got to have master builders. And so superintendents, as first planners, need to be creating, by the way, I don't know if you saw that Lego, get it? Master, nope, okay, never mind. Anyway, so master builders as supers create a proper project plan and schedule. They implement Takt planning. They make procurement a top priority. They implement the last planner system. They win over the workforce. They make procurement with the last planners in that realm as well a top priority. They find and allocate resources, and they find and remove roadblocks. Master builder project managers review the budget, manage procurement, align design with early trade partners. They build an amazing team. And with the last planners, they manage risks and opportunities, and they find and remove roadblocks. Master builders are engaged with the project. Let's talk about this real quick. I love using from the book the example of the Hoover Dam, completed under budget and ahead of schedule. Frank Crow was the general super, and he was the nation's leading dam builder. Never mind. Anyway, had a loyal team that worked with him, and they nailed it. If you look at a project like the Muskrat Falls hydrothermal dam, the project cost more than $6 billion. It was more than $6 billion over budget and was more than 5 years late. Projected cost overruns exceed 70% from $7.4 billion to $12.7 billion due to poor planning, a lack of experience, and related assumptions that were invalid, misleading, and correct. They didn't have a master builder. They didn't have the right training. They didn't have the right systems. And there are still portions of the dam that are having to be replaced today, and the dam is not fully operational. Another idea from the book that I want to close out with is let's take care of our people, right? If we've got the right team, we got master builders, we've got everything that we need, right? We're jamming and ready to go. We got a good team, right? Then we need to care for the team, the entire team. So the example here is Terminal 5. They had the best bathrooms and facilities around. Project and team merch for the entire project. They gave out PPE. I think it's actually law in that region. And they supported the trades and fostered a really nice team. Great bathrooms, great lunchrooms, great connection, great environment. They cared for their team and they did well. Another bit of advice is make friends along the way, build bridges with folks like inspectors. I remember one project for a company that I won't mention. The PM pissed off one of the inspectors for the Army Corps of Engineers, and that inspector made their life hell until they finished 2 years late at minus $6 million. And it was a huge stain on the company. Build bridges as you go. Actually plan the project before you start and use the right system. Takt planning, takt steering and control, last planner. We've got to be doing these things. One of the biggest things I want to mention as I close is that the problem is typically you. It's me. I'm not trying to insult you. You think you know more than you do. You think you're the best of the best. But what you got to realize is that you don't know what you don't know. Gather opposing views and listen to their experiences. And if you have master builders and you have a great team and you're training your people and using the right systems, you will have the visibility to get the outside view, get outside references, anchor to data, challenge the anchor, and really dig deep. And when it doesn't make sense, say no. Now, I hope this doesn't come off wrong or arrogant. I've been asked to push. I've been asked to undercut a project schedule. I've been asked to not pre-plan a job. I've been asked to rush the trades at the end. I've been asked to hurt trades. No, some more no, and a little bit of more no on the top. I said, no, we're going to plan this job. I said, no, we're not going to undercut the schedule. I said, no, we're not going to hurt trade partners. I said, no, we're not going to have the improper production plan. We're going to have flow. We're not going to rush and push and panic at the end. No. You've got to learn to say no. Most of the situations we get ourselves into are because we're not saying no. And so these are the main points from the book that I wanted to share with you. Let me just point you to these two screens. I don't want to take this out any longer, but I do want to say that here's a nice list. If you see any of these things happening, then you have a project that's in trouble. And you can probably trace it back to a lack of planning, a lack of using the right systems, and a lack of having trained people. If you want to go through this in more depth, please pause the video. I also have podcasts that we can link to you in the description below. But if you have trouble, I need you to realize right now that the root cause was not planning, not using the right systems, and not having trained and experienced people. And that's why we have what's called the Integrated Production Control System. The Integrated Production Control System is our research in the industry that basically states that we need to have the right project plan, using the Takt Production System, which keeps you on a rhythm, with the last planners, and you've got to prepare your trade partners to utilize this system, and then that will create value for the foreman. Now, if you're like, oh my gosh, Jason, what is all this stuff? Well, we have books for the first planner system, books for takt planning, steering, and control. This isn't our book, but the Lean Builder, which talks about the last planner system, Scrum for office work, and we actually wrote a book. Like if you said, Jay Money, write a book for foremen and crews for how to use the system, there you go. That's Jimmy John's Fast. We got it for you. If you look at all these together, these are the minimum components you have to have, that you have to plan, the minimum systems you have to use, and the minimum training you have to provide on your project in order for it to go well and for everybody to be supported. So there is an answer. This is not all doom and gloom. I made a case for why we have to plan projects and what happens if we don't. We have to plan those projects using the right systems, not CPM, but we have to use takt on the right rhythm. We have to do it with our builders through experience and experimentation. And so that leads us to the end of this video and heading on to other videos about the Takt Production System in this free Takt course. Because if you just implement the system and you don't plan it right, you'll be in just as much trouble as any other project. And so this second video is here to make the case that we must plan with the right systems, and we must plan with the right systems using experienced people who experiment before we ever begin. We're going to include any of the reference material in the description below in the video. I hope you've enjoyed this video. On we go.